A new report from a Marvel insider says that the plan for Hugh Jackman's Wolverine includes 10 more years of stories in the MCU.
What?
And so in this video, I want to go over this report, but I also want to explain why I'm actually excited for this. Believe it or not, even though Hugh Jackman's been playing Wolverine for like freaking ever, there are still a lot of stories from Marvel Comics that have not been adapted. So let's go over the report, and then I'm going to explain to you some dope stuff from Marvel Comics. And at the end of the video, I'm going to throw like a bonus one at you because of some rumors that were out there for Deadpool and Wolverine. I think I know where they're going to be taking this next story with Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool. Okay, so this is coming out from My Time to Shine Hello. She put out a tweet over the weekend that set the internet on fire, basically saying that Marvel wants Hugh Jackman as Wolverine for the next 10 years, and that Marvel Studios wants to do a trilogy of Deadpool and Wolverine films. Now that's freaking crazy that she came out and reported this. Shine has a pretty good track record, but this is not the first time we've heard of this rumor. In fact, I was saying even before Deadpool and Wolverine came out that I was hearing from people behind the scenes that Hugh Jackman was the new Wolverine. And the context there is with the reboot. Like, we're talking in terms of the reboot. So like a lot of the fan conversations these days are about the current MCU characters potentially being recast in the MCU reboot. Like, there are currently rumors that Sadie Sink is being looked at for Jean Grey, which would obviously be a new version of Jean Grey. It wouldn't be bringing back Famke Jenkins or Game of Thrones lady. What I'm trying to say is a lot of people were saying, hey, Deadpool Wolverine, this might be the end for Hugh Jackman. Maybe Secret Wars will be the end for Hugh Jackman, and then we'll get a new Wolverine in the MCU reboot. And I told you guys over a year ago, that's not what they're doing. They're gonna have Hugh Jackman as the Wolverine for another 10 years.
Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
And the latest scoop from My Time to Shine just shed some sort of clarity on that. So 10 more years of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. And so now I want to go over 5 different comic book stories that I think would be great to see Hugh Jackman do in his next 10 years of the MCU. But before that, a quick word from this video's sponsor. That's right, today's video is sponsored by Factor. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved moves right to your doorstep. They got a team of gourmet chefs. Do you have a team of gourmet chefs? No, you do not, but Factor does. Factor takes the stress out of eating. You don't gotta go to the grocery store. You don't gotta friggin' cook. You don't gotta friggin' clean. And this is perfect for the nerds among us so we can get back to our video games, back to our binge watching of the latest nerdy shows. And listen to me. You know you're spending way too much money ordering from restaurants on those apps. That is money you could be spending on nerdy merchandise, action figures, video games, all kinds of dope nerdy things. Factor's also good for the freaking planet. So are you inspired by Superman, by Captain America? Well, you could be kind of like them with Factor. Factor offsets 100% of the delivery emissions and sources 100% renewable electricity for the production sites and offices. For me as a dad, a YouTuber, I'm very freaking busy, man. Factor makes my life easy. I'm also trying to bulk up. Factor is the perfect way to make sure I'm getting all the meals and nutrition that I need to build these big old nerdy muscles. Seriously, guys, if you want to support the content over here and get to being a better nerd, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50DENOFNERDS to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50DENOFNERDS at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's like a ridiculously good freaking deal. Give it a shot, man. Support the channel, support yourself, support. And as I said at the start of this video, there's plenty of stories that haven't been adapted yet in the MCU that I think Hugh Jackman's Wolverine would be so cool in. The first one that came to mind for me is the Messiah Complex. Now, this was a moment in comics after House of M and after Hope Summers is the first mutant out there born after House of M. And the reason I'm going with Messiah Complex is because I think they are doing a lot of House of M stuff for Secret Wars. A lot of rumors about Wanda and Doom and the Children's Crusade stuff and potentially some big thing that's happening with the mutants in Secret Wars. And so it's possible coming out of Secret Wars in the MCU reboot, there will not be any new mutants being born. And with the idea of Avengers versus X-Men lingering, maybe the idea of Hope being born and then eventually the Phoenix Force coming for Hope Summers, that could be a really cool way to sort of kick off the new mutant thing in the MCU. And Wolverine's role in the Messiah Complex was kind of simple. He was just helping them track and try to find Hope Summers. I've always loved how desperate everything feels after House of M, and Wolverine as being one of the central mutants involved in that story, and just one of the most popular mutants in general. It would be cool to see that shade from the Hugh Jackman Wolverine, especially because the way the character's currently being built, he has a lot of anxiety and guilt about mutants, his place with the X-Men, Charles Xavier. He let a bunch of them down, and so depending on what happens out of Secret Wars, if Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is helping the current X-Men try to find the first mutant born after Secret Wars or something like that, I think that would be super freaking cool. Next up, there's a really cool story in the comics called Schism. It's not maybe one of the most popular X-Men stories ever told, but it's essentially a divide in the X-Men with Cyclops on one side and Wolverine on the other side. And it's basically about these two dudes trying to basically run the X-Men. Cyclops has his idea of how to run the X-Men. Wolverine has his idea of how to run the X-Men. And we love a heroes versus heroes story, right? Civil War was really cool. Avengers versus X-Men. We're definitely going to talk about that later in the video, but that was a big deal in comics. Schism is kind of like an attempt of a civil war between the X-Men. It's the X-Men teams potentially fighting each other and a big divide there. I think it would be super cool to involve Hugh Jackman Wolverine in something like that, especially if you get a young actor to play Cyclops and you have like a young Scotty Summers versus this like really old, really grizzled Wolverine who we have personally seen be Wolverine for like 20 plus years. That would be really cool. And the next story from Marvel Comics that I'd love to see adapted in the next 10 years for this version of Wolverine would actually be the Krakoa era. Now, I know there's a lot of mixed feelings in the comic book community about the Krakoa era, but I think most of us agree that at its inception, with a lot of the stuff that Hickman himself was directly writing, Krakoa ended up being really intriguing and cool. And Wolverine played a really interesting role in those first few books. There's a moment where they freeze him and send him to the way far future in one of Moira McTaggart's lives, which is a whole rabbit hole, but essentially Moira was discovered to be a mutant who had like a regenerative ability, but when she died it reset the entire timeline. Anyway, Wolverine being immortal played a really interesting role in one of the plans they had. It was like a mind-blowing thing. Krakoa in general was a fascinating time period for mutants where the status quo gets flipped a lot, and Wolverine's part in that is quite interesting. And I actually think there is room to adapt some of that stuff within the next 10 years with Hugh Jackman as the MCU Wolverine. Now, these last two are pretty cool because there are actually rumors that Marvel is adapting these two things. And the first one is Judgment Day. Now, I wanted to talk about Krakoa before I talked about Judgment Day because Judgment Day actually includes something that happens during the Krakoa era. Judgment Day is a story about the Deviants, the Eternals, the Avengers, and the X-Men, and all of Earth being rejudged by the Celestials. And two things kick this off. Number one, there is the discovery by the Eternals that the mutant gene, the X gene, is actually a version of the deviant gene, which to the Eternals means those dudes gots to go. So the Eternals become antagonistic of the X-Men, but there's another thing that gets the Celestials' attention and makes them actually want to judge Earth. And this has to do with the resurrection protocols that Charles Xavier creates on Krakoa. Using the combined power of 5 different mutants, Charles Xavier figures out a way to resurrect mutants as they die. Basically, Charles Xavier takes an imprint of their mind, puts it into Cerebro, then he uploads their mind into this like newly created body with their essence and stuff. The point is, the Krakoan X-Men could not die, and if they did, they would just be resurrected on the island. And the Celestials were like, that's messed up. That's against the natural order of things. Now we're gonna judge all of Earth. F you, X-Men. And like I said, there are established rumors that the next saga is going to include some of that Judgment Day stuff. And a good way to kick that off would be to use the Krakoa era, or at least the resurrection protocols from the Krakoa era, and then make the Celestials and the Eternals become involved in fighting against the X-Men. And of course, it would just be awesome to see Wolverine in the mix with all of those different characters and all that crazy stuff. Like, in the comics, Wolverine goes head to head with some of the strongest Eternals and Celestial. It seems like Kevin Feige is really interested in doing some cosmic X-Men stuff. And although we've seen different versions of like the Dark Phoenix and stuff, we haven't truly seen the X-Men, including Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, thrive in a cosmic setting. And I would absolutely love to see that. And I think there is a high possibility of that happening. And the last one is Avengers versus X-Men. And I think all of us believe the real reason Kevin Feige is holding on to Hugh Jackman as Wolverine for 10 more years is because of Avengers versus X-Men. Like, that's the most important thing. Like, that is the biggest deal of biggest deal. Avengers versus X-Men works because you got all these really popular characters on the Avengers and all these really popular characters on the X-Men, and it's cool to see them fight. And watching Hugh Jackman Wolverine fight against the Hulk, fight against the Avengers, fight against maybe Black Panther, this would be incredible. I should probably mention that in the Avengers vs. X-Men comic book, Wolverine was actually on the side of the Avengers. But I think given the context of all the Fox movies, the Marvel movies, I think you would see him be on the side of the X-Men in this Avengers vs. X-Men movie. It's something we've wanted as comic book fans for a long, long time, and I think we're going to get it. The amount of rumors indicating that Avengers vs. X-Men is a thing are crazy. I mean, you've got stuff coming out from Cryptic HD, Alex Perez, even Daniel RPK, My Time to Shine Hello. Almost every single scooper that we talk about on this channel has indicated that a version of Avengers vs. X-Men is on the horizon. Recently, Alex Perez made it seem like the Avengers vs. X-Men stuff will be set up in the next 2 Avengers movies, and that threads from those movies will then go into the mutant saga, which will cause further tension, and it will then be Avengers vs. X-Men. So like Hulk vs. Wolverine, which might end up being a World War Hulk movie. We've talked about that recently in videos you probably saw. That film also appears to play on the thread of Avengers vs. X-Men. But I also have a little bonus for you here, because I think the direction Marvel Studios will take in this Deadpool and Wolverine trilogy will have to do with Daken. Now, Daken in the comics is actually Wolverine's son. He is half Wolverine, half friggin' Canadian white guy, and then half Japanese. In the Japanese language, they literally call him Daken. It's like mixed breed, outsider, or whatever. So his actual name is even a slur. And he has a very harsh life and ends up becoming villainous, and it's super brutal. But the point is, if you look at what Deadpool and Wolverine is kind of establishing with its first movie and friendship and like second chances and stuff like that, I think it just makes sense that in the second or third movie, those two characters deal with the idea of fatherhood. They deal with the idea of Daken, because I think X-23's Daphne Keane, I think she's going to end up being sort of like a child to Logan. She already kind of is. But I think it would be very interesting if she and Logan then have to cope with the drama of him having another child that is like a total asshole and a sadistic killer. Anyway, the truth is, I think the 10 more years of Hugh Jackman Wolverine is awesome, and I believe there's a ton of great stories from comics that have not been adapted into any of the Hugh Jackman stuff, which is crazy. Like, it's crazy to think this dude's been playing this character for almost 30 years, and there's still just so many great stories from comics that we haven't seen him do. I mean, Avengers vs. X-Men, man, come on, we gotta see that. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below, and as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.